What's going on, everybody? Today I'm going to be changing my upper oil pan gasket on my C5 Corvette. Stick around and I'll show you. Alright, so I'm going to be changing out the bolts as well as the pan gasket. So the long bolts I already put on trying to stop the leak. That didn't work, so that's why they're not in this. This is a GM gasket. There are two gaskets. There's the lower one, which I've already done a video on, and then there's the upper gasket, which is this one, which is a lot more work. So of course, lift the car up, drain the oil. Be sure to put links to everything in the description of the video. You want to be sure not to put the jack stands under the cradle because we have to lower that in order to get the oil pan off. The radiator support and the fans don't have to drop, so don't worry about that. There are 6 bolts holding the cradle up, 2 for the motor mounts, and then there's 4 for the cradle itself. You're also going to have to loosen the sway bar mount bolts. I'll do all that later. Want to get this oil filter off after you finish draining the oil. You're going to want to make sure you loosen up your tires before you lift the car, because you have to get in here to the suspension and loosen up the upper control arm mounting bolts, the upper shock bolt. You're going to have to loosen the brake line mounting bolt right there. This tie rod's going to have to come out from the knuckle. Went ahead and turned the rotor to get access to this bolt. It's an 18. I used a 1/2-inch socket. Once you get that bolt off, get a separation fork or whatever kind of tool you use to pop that tie rod out from the knuckle. The upper control arm bolts are a 15. Probably going to use a breaker bar to get that loose. There are little washers or shims on some of those. You want to count how many and make sure you put them back right where they came from. You want to take off the upper or the top bolt for the shocks. Mine aren't stock, so it's not the same size. You're probably going to have to take the reservoir off, the coolant reservoir, in order to get to that bolt. The upper control arm just lifts up and comes up over that. You want to make sure you have a jack under the lower part. And you're gonna have to take off the sway bar mounting bolts from right here. These are a 13. There's 4 of them, 2 on each side. You want to take this brake line right here loose. It's a mounting bolt. It's a 10 milli. It's where the rubber hose connects to the solid line. You're not opening the lines or anything or taking the caliper off. You're just getting that off of the mounting bracket. Of course, you repeat everything from the passenger to the driver's side or vice versa, whatever way you're doing it. Only difference is on the driver's side, you want to get the steering shaft loose from the rack and pinion. It's a little 13mm bolt. Once you get that out, you just raise up on that and it comes loose. Now you're going to be ready to loosen up the motor mount bolts. They're at 18. You want to use a deep socket. I did. And breaker bar. Not going to loosen up the cradle yet, just the motor mount bolts. This is what I'm going to lower the cradle with, but I'll set that up later. There are 16 bolts for the oil pan gasket. There's 4 on the front. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then of course 4 is right around the corner. Before I go any further with those bolts and drop the pan down, you want to make sure you unplug 2 plugs. There's the oil temp sensor on the driver's side. Just a little plug you lift up on, and it comes right out when you pull it. On the passenger side, you have the oil level sensor plug. What I did is I went and got a little flathead screwdriver, stuck it in between right here and lift it up on the plug to make it unlatch, and then slowly wiggled it out. You're gonna have to remove that little bolt from that plastic piece right there. There is an oil pan bolt right above the oil or level sensor. As you can see, there's two long bolts that go through the back up into the rear main cover. Those are those two right there. There's one in this hole right here. There's one right here, and there's another under the cradle. Reason you loosen the motor bolts up is you can put a piece of wood under the motor, use a jack, lift it up so that you can get to those bolts, because it's kind of a tight fit in there. You're probably gonna have to use a open-end wrench. That's what I used. Let's see. There were the ones on the front, and then on the passenger side there's another one. Just like I said, lift the motor up, you'll be able to get in there with an open end. There's two on each side of the oil filter. Then there's another plastic piece, and then you don't want to even touch the oil temp sensor housing. There's two big 13s on the back of the motor. These are not into the gasket, but you're gonna have to take these out. Once you get those out, oil pan, would it be considered a oil pan motor? But it's loose now, but you can't drop it, of course, because of the cradle or the cross members in the way. I put a transmission jack under there as a secondary. I don't know what it's gonna hold up, but to loosen these bolts up, you need a, what is this, 13/16 deep socket. Use that with a breaker bar. Of course, you want to put your jack or whatever you're going to use to drop the cradle in the way first. So I got this Daytona support brace, tucks up in there real nice. Got it from Harbor Freight, put it on my jack. With these bolts, I just loosened them up until the end of the threads. That didn't work, of course, when I started lowering stuff. But before you lower anything, I used the engine support bar, got it from Harbor Freight. I just used two bolts, one into each head. Of course, I used the alternator bolt on the driver's side. It's pretty easy. It is sitting on plastic on the fenders, which probably isn't a good idea, so I wouldn't do it. If you have an engine lift or something, go with that. I did this real quick. I didn't want it to be sitting there for that long. As you can see, the cross member couldn't come down low enough. Even took the bolts off and lowered it just a little bit more. Still wouldn't do it enough. You're gonna have to lower it quite a bit. Not super far, but quite a bit. Just make sure you're taking your time watching everything. So the oil pan is now out. This is a two-piece oil pan. So I did do a video long ago on the lower part. This is the upper part. It is riveted on. There's one rivet right there, another on the passenger side. I don't know if there's supposed to be more, but as you can see, this is not in good shape, especially the back. I used a punch and a hammer to get those rivets out. The driver one came out pretty good. Passenger one gave me some a little bit of problems. Be careful with the pan, make sure you don't crack it. I did accidentally crack my oil temp sensor, replace that. It's small potatoes, whatever. You can clean your oil pan now that it's out. Make sure it's no sludge in there or anything, no dirt that you accidentally dropped in there. Make sure you clean your mating surfaces on the motor, as well as the pan. A lot of people like to use silicone on the back where it meets the rear main cover, and on the front and the corners. So you want to make sure you get that off if you are going to put some I didn't show me putting it back in, but of course I'm gonna torque everything down for you. So you want to be really careful torquing these down. I don't know the sequence, but I know that the rear two, the long ones, are 106 inch-pounds compared to 18 foot-pounds on the rest. So you're gonna probably have to use two different types of torque wrenches unless you want to translate that. So just make sure you don't snap those back ones. That's what a lot of people do, accidentally over torquing those. Before you torque down the engine mount bolts, you want to make sure you get those screws that are up under that cross member right there. It's probably going to be really hard torquing those down to spec, so I just use the ooga doogas on that. Don't forget to plug back in your sensors, the oil level sensor and the oil temp sensor on the driver's side. You want to do that after you torque down the pan. The tie rod arm is 15 foot-pounds on the first pass, and then final pass 33 foot-pounds. The upper shock bolt is gonna be 19 foot-pounds. Upper control arm mounting bolts 48 foot-pounds. Make sure you get those shims back on there, right? The cross member bolts are going to be 81 foot-pounds. You're supposed to use new ones. You want to make sure you put the sway bar mounting bolts on after you tighten down the cross member. Don't forget to tighten up your engine mount bolts. Those are, I believe, 48 foot-pounds. I don't think it's the same as the rest of the cross member. Don't forget to get your drain plug back in, oil filter on, fill it up with 6 quarts, make sure there's no leaks, make sure everything's plugged in, of course. There is an alignment tool to align the oil pan gasket. I didn't use one, I'm sorry about that. I don't have any leaks, but I do recommend using one. But once again, thank you guys for watching. See you guys on the next one.